Today, Israel's Security Cabinet is to meet after final details of the Gaza ceasefire were revealed and signed off overnight and are to be approved by the Security Cabinet before the full Cabinet gives them the go-ahead. Now, despite yesterday's delayed Cabinet meetings, Mr. Netanyahu's office said that approval was imminent. A group representing families of Israeli hostages in Gaza, 33 of whom are due to be freed, urged the Israeli Prime Minister to move forward quickly. Now, one of the hostages remaining is Omri Miran, who was captured by Hamas on the October the 7th attack. And I'm joined now by his brother-in-law, Moshe Emilio Lavi. Moshe, good morning and welcome.
Good morning, sir.
Will you remind us of the circumstances of your brother-in-law's capture? And it might not just have been him, it might have been more of the family.
Yeah, Omri was taken hostage on October 7th from Kibbutz Nachal Oz. He was kidnapped from his home in front of his wife, my sister Lishai, and their two daughters, Ronnie and Alma, 3 and a year and a half. They were held captive for hours in their own home, then grouped with other family from another family from the kibbutz. And eventually at around 1:30 p.m., and mind you, the attack started at 6:29, Omri was separated from Lishai, kidnapped. Lishai told him she loves him, she'll take care of the girls, and asked him not to be a hero. He responded to her that he loves her, and that was the last time she saw him. Lishai and the girls were rescued at 5:30 that day, luckily, without having endured the same fate as Omri.
Was there any real explanation ever understood by Lishai as to why they didn't take more of the family?
They don't know. It was really a Russian roulette that day. Some of Hamas terrorists or their accomplices would just decide who is to live, who is to be left behind, who is to be kidnapped. But after Omri was taken, they were instructed to stay in the house or else they'll be shot. And the fighting was still raging inside and outside that home where they were held captive until they were rescued.
Now, the events of October the 7th were terrible. The events that have followed are equally terrible for both hostages and for anybody under the bombardment in Gaza. What news have you had in that intervening time as to the whereabouts and survival of Omri?
Yeah, it's been a devastating war, and I share the empathy to those non-combatant in Gaza who have been affected by the war that Hamas launched on October 7th. We haven't received many news about Omri, but in late April, a video was released of him, a psychological warfare video featuring him and Keith Siegel, another hostage. He didn't look well, but we were relieved to see he's alive. And it gave us the strength to continue advocating for him with our own government, with our own elected officials, and of course worldwide. I'm based in the US at the moment, and I do a lot of advocacy work there. And today I'm speaking to you from London because families of hostages have been doing some meetings here as well. We'll keep fighting until everyone is home. We believe Omri is still alive. We have no reason to believe otherwise. And we keep reminding our elected officials and the international community that they have a duty to bring home all the hostages and bring an end to this war with Hamas not remaining in power in Gaza.
Now, it is obviously mixed feelings because were Israel to leave Gaza in exchange for the hostages and leaving Israel itself perhaps vulnerable to a resumption of hostilities by Hamas, it might be a hollow enough victory. But for families, they desperately want to get their loved ones home. So, as I suggest, mixed feelings among the families.
Yeah, first and foremost, feelings are mixed today because we know only about the first phase of the deal. It's still unclear whether the next two phases will be completed. And so there's no certainty. There's also no certainty that the deal will be carried out. We have obviously no trust in Hamas to carry out the agreement appropriately. And yes, it's, I wish that our region will be more peaceful. But it's unclear that this deal will allow Hamas to possibly regroup in the future. Our duty in Israel and duty of the entire other regional actors is to ensure that there are ways to manage Hamas, both militarily but also diplomatically, to see how we can find a path to ensure Hamas doesn't regroup, doesn't rearm, and allow Gaza to prosper in the future as a good neighbor to our country, the state of Israel. I believe that it's our duty as a country to preserve our social contract, to preserve our national ethos of redeeming the captive, both national and religious ethos of redeeming captives from the enemy. And so it's imperative to do it. And we will continue to defend ourselves in the future. And hopefully policymakers understand that they also need to find diplomatic solutions to root causes of this conflict.
Now, the question of whether or not it will be ratified by the Security Cabinet and then by the entire Cabinet, you've been hearing, I know, that the National Security Minister, Ben-Gvir, said he would resign if the government ratifies the ceasefire in Gaza. And he was urging the finance minister, Bezalel Smotrich, who described the deal as a catastrophe, to join him in attempting to scupper the deal. What do you say about that kind of opposition within the Israeli government to the deal?
So I think that it's important to note that Israel is a democratic country, and so these processes are part of the democratic discourse. This needs to be approved in the Security Cabinet, the government, and possibly even the Supreme Court if citizens file an objection to the deal. We're not like Hamas. Hamas is a terrorist organization that can decide one day that they're ending the war and decide the next day that they're resuming it without any democratic process. I disagree with Minister Ben-Gvir. I think he hasn't been an ally of families of hostages since the beginning of the crisis, and also has not taken responsibility for his role in leading up to October 7th. Neither he nor anybody else in the government. But I'm confident that the vote will go through, that the government will approve it. There is a majority. We are in contact with ministers, with other elected officials. And it's clear to us that there is a majority in the government for this, in the Knesset for this, and also among the citizens of the country. Every poll since May emphasized that a vast majority of Israelis, about 70%, would want to see the hostages home, even if it means we are ending the war without achieving all our goals. But we achieved a lot militarily in dismantling Hamas force, taking down their leaders, and also taking down other nefarious actors in the region, like Hezbollah.
Now, the question of your brother-in-law, Omri, and when he might be released. I mean, he is not in the age cohort that would qualify for release on the basis of age. As far as you know, and you cannot really know, he is not infirm, though. He is probably still in relatively sound health. So when might he be released?
I wish I could answer that. I will say first that I don't believe that in day 468, any hostage is in a sound situation. Every hostage should be considered a humanitarian cause. They've endured so much torture, sexual violence, abuse, deprivation of food, water, sanitation, and sunlight. And I'm sure you would understand that going through that for 15 months is inhuman. So I doubt Omri is in a good state at the moment. But sadly, yes, he's probably not going to be included in the first phase, which means us, the families, those who will still have loved ones in captivity, but also those who will be reunited, will have to resume our struggle to ensure the Israeli government goes with negotiating a second phase, ensure that the US does all it can to pressure Qatar, Turkey, Iran, Hamas sponsors to force Hamas for the second stage. And that's going to be our advocacy work in the next few weeks. every day in captivity and every second in captivity is eternal. Is eternity for the hostages. So we need to get them out as soon as possible, and also will ensure the alleviation of the humanitarian crisis in Gaza.
How precarious do you think this ceasefire is? We know it wasn't immediately signed when it was announced in Qatar, and then overnight we've heard that it has been signed off. All the last details that Anthony Blinken referred to seem to have been tidied up, so an agreement is there. But how precarious do you think it is? Because there may be some rogue actors who will try to cause trouble and maybe disrupt the process.
It is very precarious. I think once Israel approves it, there won't be any issue from our side. But it is very precarious because, as you stated, there are rogue actors, and I think Iran is still meddling behind the scenes with Hamas. Hamas itself. Only 2 days ago, its leader, Khalil al-Khaya, one of its leaders abroad, outside Gaza, celebrated October 7th and promised to do it again and again. This is not what you call good faith partners for any agreement. So I don't trust Hamas. I will not trust them even after the first hostages being released, because as we saw in the November 23 deal, in the last day of the deal, they breached their agreement. They also breached what they promised, to allow the ICRC to visit the hostages. The ICRC never visited the hostages. And so we can't trust them. Every day on a battlefield is dangerous for the hostages, dangerous for anybody involved. Our soldiers, combatants in Gaza, and of course the non-combatants there. And so we need to ensure the ceasefire holds. But I know from my experience in the military that a war is the kingdom of uncertainty, and so we can't be certain until the first hostage is out, and we will not stop advocating and fighting for this cause until the last hostage is released by Hamas.
Now, Moshe, obviously you've heard the international criticism of the nature of the bombardment and the destruction in Gaza. 10% of the Gazan population may be dead, and many more are maimed. But the question of the non-combatant population, Hamas presumably would hope to recruit from that cohort to rebuild its resources. And the question is whether or not what Israel has done to Gaza is enough of a deterrent to stop the rebuilding of Hamas, because they do need the support of ordinary people to rebuild that organization.
I wish that both the populations in Israel and the Gaza Strip, the Palestinian territories generally, will understand that war is not the way to settle disagreements. But sadly, and I say it as a student of history and international relations in the past, war is part of humanity, of the human existence. I don't think this agreement is going to bring about peace in the Middle East. We shouldn't be optimistic about that. And but I hope it's going to make the first steps of seeing a post-war reality that is better for everyone. But as long as Hamas remains an actor, as long as the Palestinian Islamic Jihad remains an actor in Gaza, as long as international actors such as Iran, Turkey, Qatar continues empowering those organizations, I don't think we'll see a relief, neither for Israeli non-combatants nor for Gaza non-combatants. I wish for better days to come, and I'm going to keep working for that, and found allies in the Palestinian community abroad to keep advocating for that. But there's so much that needs to be done. Let's finalize this deal. Let's allow all the hostages to return home to their loved ones, and then let's start reconstructing Gaza, changing the education curriculum there, ensuring that we are building for peace and mutual recognition rather than building additional walls of hate.
And finally, Moshe, I should ask you about recriminations within Israel itself, because obviously October the 7th, it was an operation planned by Hamas and executed without any forewarning. by the intelligence systems in Israel that this was likely to happen. There were predictions, if you recall, around that time that there might be trouble in the West Bank, but not that there would be trouble coming from Gaza. What form do you think those recriminations will take now in Israel if the ceasefire holds? If it doesn't, of course, all bets will be off.
I think once the war ends and all the hostages return, our role as citizens is to demand the government to form, and the Knesset to form a national inquiry committee to ensure that all the failures ahead of October 7th, during October 7th, and ever since October 7th will be examined by an impartial body, as done before, like after the 1973 war, the Yom Kippur War. That committee led to elected officials take responsibility for their failures, for military commanders to take responsibility. We will keep demanding it as families of hostages, families of those who were murdered that day, were injured, families of communities who were ravaged that day. And I hope that will take fold as soon as the war ends. We need that committee to be formed. We need to know what happened. We need to receive answers. I personally believe that our elected officials have yet to take responsibility in an appropriate manner. And so that will be our next battle. But for now, I'm focusing on Omri, a beautiful human being, a shiatsu and a gardener, and a lover of nature, humanity. And I'm focusing on bringing him home to my nieces, Ronnie and Alma. They need him. My sister Lishan needs him. And all the hostages must return home. Once they return, we can start the introspection, start the rebuilding, and hope for better days to come.
Well, Moshe Emilio Lavi, thank you for joining us, and we hope that your brother-in-law, Omri Miran, is released as soon as is humanly possible, because clearly he's a family man and his family miss him terribly, and let's hope for that reunification very, very soon.